Okay, we're just going to leave it. Today we're going to talk about license agreements, and I didn't mention this in the talk title, but specifically we're going to talk about open source license agreements. There's hundreds of license agreements out there, and we're not going to talk about all of them. We're only going to talk about 5 today, but they're the big ones. They're the ones that you've probably heard about, or at least heard of some of them. So my reason for giving this talk is, and I'm included in this, I think that we as developers, we see a lot of license agreements for all the tools we use, a bunch of them, but we may not know what the differences are. We see some of them are 2 paragraphs, some of them are 5 pages long. What's the difference? And I never dug into really what they were. I know that, I've seen this one before, it's probably an open source license agreement. But I want to just take like 10 minutes to dig into what the differences are, and just the main differences. We're just going to gloss over a lot of that stuff. But hopefully you can come out of this today knowing a little bit more about what these certain license agreements are, and what the differences are. And I'm trying hard not to mention any of them because I've got a single shirt here. If you know me, if you've seen me talk before, you know I throw shirts out. I've got one shirt. It's an XL here. If you can give me, we'll do the one question right now. If you can tell me 3 different license agreements, they don't have to be open source, just something that's popular, you get beautiful Clevyr Lab shirt. Anyone want to take a guess? 3 license agreements. How about we knock it down to 2? There we go. Roger, I see you back there.
MIT.
Yes.
Apache.
Boom. Oh, you did the full thing. Yep. All right. Very good. And we're going to be talking about those 3 today, not necessarily the GNU, but GPL specifically. Okay. Let's hop to it. So that's me. I'm the code boss. I work at a company called Clevyr. We're a mile up the road. We do software development consulting, websites, mobile applications. We work with a lot of local organizations. If you have any interest in what we do, come talk to me afterwards. I also work at Clevyr Labs, ripping the shirt today. We do augmented reality, virtual reality, a lot of fun stuff. I've got a neat business card demo. If anyone has got any interest in that, again, find me afterwards. I'd love to show it off. So let's hop to it. The purpose of open source licenses, compared to proprietary licenses usually restrict use for certain purposes, typically to make money for the users, or the original creators of the software. Open source licenses are usually a little bit different. They're not about restricting permissions. They're more about just being very explicit so that you as the contributor, that's the purpose, you're the main user as the contributor, is that so you know how you can contribute to the software and what you can and can't do. Can you license, or can you distribute it once you've contributed to it? Can you make a derivative work from it? Is it free, for example? Those are all things just very explicit about what permissions you have to use this software. There's 4 main concerns when we dig into open source licenses, and these kind of, proprietary licenses as well are concerned with these. Those 4 main concerns, though, are modifications. Can you modify the software? Do you have permissions to do that? Do you have permission to distribute this software? Via also with modification would be, do you have permission to make a derivative work of it? Which means taking it, making small changes, and relicensing it as your own. Who has access to this, meaning kind of global. If you're creating a license in the United States, does someone in China have access to it, et cetera? And then price. Pretty much all these license agreements are going to be free, but there is one, which we're going to dig into, which you can actually sell a product that you took that was licensed as something else. So we're going to talk about, I've kind of grouped these up into categories. We're going to talk about the common open source libraries, and the first category makes up MIT, BSD, and Apache. And these are kind of the, let's see if I've got a little quote in here somewhere. Okay, so we'll talk about MIT first, and the quote for most of these libraries are, "It's free, use it however you want, just don't sue me." They're very permissive, almost to the extent where they don't explicitly define what those permissions are. The MIT license, for example, and that's what we're going to talk about first, it's very short. It's 2 clauses. It's 2 paragraphs. If you've seen it at the bottom of a GitHub repo as 2 paragraphs, that's literally all it is. It is very short. It pretty much, and you've probably read it a couple of times, it pretty much just says, here's the base permissions. You can release it however you want to. You can copy it. You can make derivative works. You can do just about anything, but there's no warranty. There's don't sue me. That's the don't sue me clause. One way that the MIT license differs, it's one of the most permissive licenses out there. One of the ways it differs is that The other licenses that we're going to talk about are all open source licenses. You can't actually sell that product to make money. MIT license, you can, and what that means is that if I am on, I think Node.js is under MIT license, I could actually take that work, and if I wanted to, just literally, without making changes, just say, all right, I'm selling a Node.js. Who will buy my Node.js? And I could make product off that, and I can make money off that, and that's completely legal. The only difference is that, the only requirement is that I can't take the license away from the product in that case, because I'm literally selling someone else's product, or the community's product. I didn't make that product, so the license has to stick with it. But I can do that. I can sell it. That's the only license we're going to talk about that you can do that with. So again, just very permissive, very short. It's just do whatever you want. Please don't sue me. Let's talk about BSD. There's a couple versions of BSD. There's BSD2, BSD3. What those numbers stand for are the number of clauses in the agreement. So BSD2 is a 2-clause agreement. That's how MIT works as well. It's very short. They're very similar length, and BSD2 behaves very similar to MIT. BSD3 adds something, and there's another version called BSD4, which adds another clause. We're not going to get into that because it's not as common. I don't want to overload anyone. So BSD2 is very similar to the MIT license, except for you can't sell a product. So if something is licensed as BSD2 and I take that product as is, I can't sell it. That's not in the license agreement. Otherwise, it's very similar. There are minute differences, but nothing enough to bring up. BSD3, however, includes this idea of that. Then the third clause is what's called a non-endorsement clause. So what that means is that if I take a product that's BSD3 licensed and I make a change to it, I can't say that the original contributors endorse my product. I can't say that I can't really mention that at all. I can maybe mention them as original contributors to a pre-derived product, but I can't say, hey, Roger over here helped me build this product whenever he just built the original one and I made changes to it. I can't do that. That's not in the license agreement. And we just went over that. You can't use the original contributors to endorse your derived product. But otherwise, it's similar to MIT. You can distribute it however you want to. You can make changes. It does have to be free, so very similar otherwise. Apache is the last one of this category we're going to talk about. And then after that, we just got 3 more. So Apache is like MIT, but on crack, I will say. It is more super permissive. It forces you to be permissive. It's accessible to everyone. This is why I brought up the idea earlier of if I'm in the United States and I write a license agreement, does it apply to someone else in another country? With Apache, it does. It's global. Any license agreement signed and created in any country applies everywhere. And it's free. It forces your product to be free, just like BSD. So your project is free. Anyone can use it, and your rights will always remain. Your rights are irrevocable. They'll always be there. So similar to the MIT, but if you just want to force accessibility and force very open permissions, Apache is for you. And that's kind of the big category of don't sue me, use it however you want. Those are all very permissive. Now we're going to get into the hardcore open source licenses, and if you realize we haven't talked about the big one yet, the one you may have heard of, that's going to be GPL, and I call this one a hardcore open source. You don't get a shirt if you answer this, but does anyone know why it's a hardcore open source library? All right.
Because it forces you to open source derivative works.
Yes, and there's a word for that too. We're going to get into that. So the answer to the question was it forces you to keep derivative works that you make under the same license agreement. None of them so far have done that. So let's get into what that means. First of all, GPL stands for General Public License. It was created in '85, I think, by Richard Stallman, the creator of Emacs. Just some fun facts for you. So any project licensed under GPL has to be free. That's fine. That's how Apache works. That's how BSD works. It's very permissive. You can do anything. Anything that kind of MIT lets you do, you can do with GPL. And this is the idea of this library. It's meant to be just an open source contributor's dream. You can copy the code. You can distribute it however you want to. You can't sell the code necessarily. You can't make money off of it. But if you wanted to charge for installing a GPL licensed product on someone's computer, you can charge for that. It's kind of like when you buy something off Amazon and they're charging you for building the cabinet that you bought the parts for. That's kind of what you can do here. You can legally do that. You can modify the code. There's a caveat though, and it's not a bad one at all. It's ideally supposed to be a good thing. But the purpose, this is the thing. This is what Jesse was just mentioning. The word for GPL for forcing the license to go on to other products that you use it for is called copylefted. So what that means is if I am building a product and let's say I have like 20 different libraries in there, and they use whatever licensing agreements, if any one of those dependencies has the GPL license on it, I have to use the GPL license for my product, and that's what the word copylefted means. It's you have to leave the not copyright, but the licensing agreement on there, and and if you do that, that means you can't sell your product. So if you use any dependencies that are GPL licensed, you will not be able to sell your product to make money. So the GPL is a copylefted license. None of the other ones have been like that. If I wanted to use something that was MIT licensed in my project, I don't have to have that project be MIT licensed. It can be whatever I want it to be. Not with GPL. Anyway, and the point of this is to keep it open source. It's an open source licensing agreement to keep it open. There is another version, and here's my little quote for this. It's free, and your project will be too. So there's kind of a bonus thing I wanted to mention with the GPL, and there's another licensing agreement called the LGPL, which stands for Lesser GPL, the General Public License. It is more or less the same thing as the GPL, but it removes that copylefted requirement. So if you have a product that's licensed under the LGPL, and someone else uses that as a dependency in their product, you don't have to keep that dependency. You don't have to keep that licensing agreement. So LGPL is GPL minus that copylefted requirement. And then there's one last thing I want to talk about. We're on the home stretch here, and it's not an open source licensing agreement per se, but if you've ever messed with design files before or stock images or anything like that, then you may have heard of this, and it's the Creative Commons licensing agreement. It's not open source, but it's a free license agreement. You cannot charge for anything under Creative Commons, but it's not open source because the purpose of it is there's really not much code that is behind the Creative Commons. It's more design files, so you're not really contributing to files, to products. There's 4 parts of the Creative Commons, and they can be used individually or as a combination, and those 4 parts are attribution, share alike, non-commercial, and no derivative works. So what these mean are that attribution is where you can require that if someone uses your product and it's under Creative Commons, they have to attribute you. That's it. That would be the lowest. That would be the most permissive thing. Share alike is the same thing as copylefted. That's just how they define it. So if you use this Creative Commons thing to build something that you're building, you have to use Creative Commons. Non-commercial means you can require that this image not be used for commercial purposes. So if I'm doing something, if I create an image, I can require that you don't make money off of it. And no derivative works is you can't modify it. You can't modify it for your own gain. You just have to use the image as is. So we've kind of talked about the big ones. What are the top 3 licenses? And they're all ones we've talked about. The top 3 across GitHub, the big one is MIT license. Rails uses it, Node.js uses it, a ton of other popular libraries use it. I would say it's probably the go-to these days for, I'm putting something up there, let me put a license agreement. MIT is just the default one. It's super permissive, easy. GPL is the next common one, and it's been around for quite a while, approaching 38 years at this point. And Apache is the next one. So together these are making over 50%? Yeah, over 50% of. I believe these are GitHub repositories as opposed to just all open source products. That's it. Thanks. If you want to know more about the company I work for, Clevyr and Clevyr Labs, that's our VR, AR side. Here's the websites. And then if you want to know more about me, I'm Aaron Krauss. I am the code boss. And I have a website called thesociety.org with a blog post explaining why it's named that. But that's it. That's all I got. Thanks. Let's grab some pizza.